As someone who plays video games, have you seen something get made or announced that makes you question, what were they thinking? Think about any and all of the biggest flops of the last year to this one. Anthem, Destiny 2, Battlefront, Fallout 76, Diablo Immortal, the list goes on. From the outside looking in, it's easy to see where the problems are as people who are embroiled into the video game industry and the game within itself. And yet, these things continue to happen. Why can we as gamers see the trouble brewing ahead, but not the people running the show? Simple. Because the people who are making the decisions on what games are and aren't made don't play video games. Let's talk about it, shall we? Let me start off by saying I am by no means saying that these CEOs and COOs need to be playing video games 24/7. They have businesses to run, of course, but their views from atop their ivory towers heavily hampers and limits how they see things. They don't understand why certain games are popular, the little nuances in each one from what platforms they're played on to what their graphical appeal is. And if you were to show these publishers something like this per se, they couldn't tell you why it was popular, but they could see it and blindly couple up a team of developers, oftentimes having no business making the kind of game they're being talked about, and then blaming everyone except for themselves on its failings. Oh, before we continue, let me just point out that I am not blaming the developers for this. Technical issues are their fault, as long as they aren't rushed, but make no mistake that they aren't the ones deciding which games are being made, how they're being made, or certain factors that are put into them. They're the chefs putting the food together, but if the manager gives them subpar ingredients, a minute to cook a 5-star steak dinner when they're a burger place, that isn't their fault. Now back to your regularly scheduled rants. Now anyone who plays a lot of games can tell you certain things that will and won't work. If a company that comes from a ground up making single player story driven RPGs, they shouldn't dip their toe into the live service open world shooter market. They lack the skill necessary to make such a product, and I'm not saying there aren't cases of companies leaping out of their wheelhouse and making something great. But I am saying there are far more cases, especially in the last couple of years, of companies doing just that and making subpar products. One of the largest showcases of this problem I've seen as of late is Diablo Immortal and its announcement. I've actually made a video pointing out how I believe that Diablo Immortal on paper is a good idea, and we have Bethesda doing this concept properly a few years prior with Fallout Shelter and Fallout 4. While I would consider them both meh compared to their other games in their franchises, Bethesda was at least aware enough to realize that its community would be up in arms when they announced Fallout Shelter and only Fallout Shelter. So what they did was announce Fallout Shelter as something on the side to get people hyped about the game they knew people cared about, Fallout 4. Which is kind of funny in retrospect because look where we are now with Fallout 76. Blizzard, on the other hand, somehow either forgot or didn't realize that their fanbase, the one they've been cultivating on PC since 1994, and even before that on consoles since 1991 with the original Super Nintendo titles, would want a mobile title. Mind you, once again, with Diablo being on PC since 1996, the fact they would even fathom and think this was a good idea to be their centerpiece instead of using this to tide their players over until Diablo 4 was a mistake. The problem is, after seeing the obscene amount of cash made in the mobile market, they decided to use one of their flagship games as a jumping off point for the sake of money rather than appreciation of their fans. And make no mistake, this was based purely on the money end of things, and for no reason besides that. Clown the mobile market all you want and call it a platform for big gamers, but out of the top 10 most popular games of 2018, only one of them doesn't have a mobile port, and there are rumors on the horizon that that one is getting one as well. Make no mistake, I'm not saying nor am I one of those people who thinks companies should only try to survive based purely off the goodwill of the people, because the countless amount of times companies have gone under while doing the right thing is staggering. However, on the same notion, these company heads are so blind to their own community, they actively sabotage all goodwill built up over years of trust and adoration for said companies. Anyone who's been with Blizzard from the start could tell you no one wanted a mobile Diablo game over an actual Diablo game. No one who has been with BioWare from the start wanted a looter shooter from them over another grand, breathtaking narrative-driven tale. No one who's been with Bethesda from the start wanted an open world stripping down of Fallout. No one wanted all the things that made Fallout, its characters and the interactions with the world along with it, Fallout, removed. But because these heads follow trends rather than get down with their developers, their fans, the people who have been with them since day one defending every foolhardy stupid mistake, we are left with the case after case of the blind leading the blind. Back in the day, the people who decided what games were made looked like this. The people who were embroiled into the culture of video games, who understood what people wanted. At least that's what Western developers looked like anyway. As the times went on, and video games became more than just a hobby, but an industry all on its own, things changed. it became clear that the developers tended not to be all that business savvy. So delegation slipped into the hands of large companies and businessmen and women who saw dollar signs, and people who were embroiled so thoroughly into the industry they didn't understand what made it successful in the first place. This isn't a problem that only video games have either, but it's one far too common as companies get large, and it's kind of a shame. In the chasing of the almighty dollar, these companies that many people grew up with are losing their hearts, their souls, and the things that made them who they are. The sad thing is, they aren't gonna stop either. As long as we continue to fund them, this constant train wreck after train wreck of poor decisions will continue. But that's just how it goes nowadays. Oh well, at least we still have the energy market. And Nintendo's being hit or miss sometimes, you know?